Some of today's stories do contain subject matter that some people may find disturbing, and viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I had been using a few dating apps casually to meet new people. I've probably made more friends than a significant other, but it is what it is. I did have one pretty crazy experience, though, that kind of turned me off the whole thing for a few months. I matched with a guy that started his message with a blurb from one of my favorite books that I listed on the site. I thought it was pretty impressive because it wasn't a mainstream or popular book either, so this guy either had to read it or looked into it just to send this. To be honest, it was a cheesy mystery romance, so I doubted that he'd actually read it. But to take the time to look into it stood out to me, and I liked that. I'm a sucker for the grossly romantic stuff, so he had already piqued my interest. We started talking, and probably after about a week, he asked me to dinner. I told him that I would go with him if he told me truthfully whether or not he had read the book. And, to my surprise, he admitted that he knew nothing of it until he saw my profile and had looked into it. We both had a good laugh, and I appreciated his honesty, and we set a date. He said that he wanted to pick me up from my place. I lived in an apartment, so I just told him the name of the complex and the building. That way, my exact unit was unknown just in case. And I waited for him out front. I got a text saying that he would be there within 2 minutes, and I was in awe when I looked up to see not a fancy car or a limo, but a horse-drawn carriage. The guy got out, and while the carriage was gorgeous, I was actually thankful he didn't have on a suit and a tie, as I would have been way underdressed. He had said that this was the proper way to pick me up, since I was a romantic like himself. I thought that it was incredibly sweet and thoughtful, if not a little embarrassing since it was starting to draw attention. It wasn't a bad embarrassment, but like when you're called out at work for doing a good job and you don't expect it. So he helped me up into the carriage, and we headed to the restaurant, which was in a very upscale part of town. Dinner was fantastic. I had never been to this place, as it normally would be way out of my budget, but after asking to go elsewhere, because I didn't want to assume that he was going to pay, or in the off chance the date was a flop, I could pay and leave quickly, he insisted that we should go here, and not to worry about the cost, as he was covering everything. So I just kind of let it go. He got a bottle of wine, and we shared bruschetta, and I had the best shrimp Alfredo that I still have ever had in my life. Our personalities clicked so well. We had many things in common, and even our pet peeves had lined up. After dinner, we decided to walk around the plaza where the huge fountain is. It was just a lot of fun, and I was pretty into the guy. After about half an hour or so, he said that we could just ride around in the carriage some, but said that he wanted to stop by this place to grab something. I honestly wasn't ready to end the night, so I was more than willing to go with him. His place was probably about 20 minutes out of the plaza area. It was a cute little 2-story house with a fenced-in front yard. When we stopped, he said that he would be right back, and then he hopped out. But then the driver of the carriage also hopped out and followed him into the house. I sat there kind of curious, but again was probably clouded by how great the night had really been. I went to pull out my phone and start a text to my friend, and when I started hearing people talking and getting closer, I looked over, and I see my date, the driver, as well as an older woman and 4 other people walking towards the carriage, smiling. They had all come out of my date's house. I stayed where I was until my date approached and offered his hand, asking if I would step down for a moment. I didn't know what was going on, so I just accepted it and got out. As soon as I stepped out, he introduced me to everyone that was around. This was his family. His dad was the carriage driver the whole time, the older lady was his mom, and the other 4 people were his siblings. While I did still think that the carriage was romantic, from what I got out of him, he didn't really choose it. That was just their normal means of transportation. None of them had a car. Then, I started getting bombarded by questions from his mother and his 2 sisters. The mom asked me about flowers, what I liked, my dress size, what type of design I preferred, and said that she would be making it for me. I was confused as to what was going on, and then I saw his mom snatch the daughter by the arm to move her out of the way. I was face to face with my date, until he fell to one knee and held out this gigantic, old-looking ring that was pretty clearly not going to fit me anyways. Everyone was standing there, silent, smiling. I didn't know where I was or what to even say. Obviously, I wanted to say no. I just met this guy, but it was so awkward that nothing was coming out of my mouth. When I did finally get my voice back, all I could really muster was, "I need to go." I'm guessing they were all really expecting a straight answer by the look on their faces, but my date quickly stood up and brought me back to the carriage. I told him that I could get a ride so as to not be a bother, but he insisted on taking me home. So, we both climbed into the back and his father was in the front. The ride back was pretty damn awkward. We hardly spoke, and when we did, I felt like he was just talking to talk. He mentioned how he knew a house nearby that was for sale. He told me some facts about an old grade school nearby that was now sitting empty, and of course, started talking about the weather. Once we got to my place, he tried walking into the building with me, but I stopped him at the door. He asked me when we would see each other again, and I told him I wasn't sure, but I wanted him to have a good night. He even tried to go in for a kiss, and I just backed up and went inside. I called my friend immediately and told her what all had happened, and she agreed that I needed to put an end to that immediately, so as to not lead him on or give him any ideas. We hardly knew each other, and he was already wanting to get married? That is insane. I messaged him that night, and I told him that it wasn't going to work out, and that I wished him the best. That went on longer than it needed to, as he kept pushing me that I was wrong, since the date seemed to go so well. This guy really acted like this dating site was some kind of planned marriage or something. I basically explained to him, like I would my grandparents, how it was used. He was still adamant that I was the one and started spouting off some religious stuff that I couldn't follow. So, I basically ended it at, "We're done here. Do not message me again. Good luck in the future." I figured that that would be the end of it. But other than the random text here and there, he also tried to add me on Facebook. And when that wouldn't work, he tried adding my friends, telling them lies about things that I apparently told him on our date. He even tracked me down on some future dates that I had gone on with other guys, and even a business lunch claiming that I cheated on him, and called me some other colorful names. Thankfully, he didn't stick around when he started being threatened by my friends and coworkers. I did have one date leave during the event, saying he didn't want to be involved, but I can't say that I blame him. While this was all very stressful and ruined some potential things for me, the worst part of it all was when I saw him standing out front of my complex, just staring up at it. He still had no idea which one I was in, and I think that that was probably the only thing that stopped him from going any further. I was just worried that one day he would be out there as I was leaving or coming home, and then I worried what his other intentions were. At one point, though, he did add my ex, and we were on good terms, so he told me about what he was telling him, too. My ex actually said a few things back to him. I don't know what exactly because he wouldn't tell me, but I never heard from him again. So it's probably best that I don't know. I'm sorry if this wasn't all that creepy, but there was definitely a mix of emotion during this time. So, again, it was pretty stressful. I do still use the same dating app, and I'm still a sucker for romantic stuff, but I've made sure to drive myself from then on. I actually have 2 dating stories that should be pretty quick, hopefully, and they're not necessarily horror as in scary, but they're horror in the sense that they were horrifying and turned me off online dating pretty much altogether. I don't think much backstory is really needed for me, beyond the fact that I was in my mid-20s, have never really had luck with meeting people that I cared to really spend time with, and I wasn't exactly picky with who I swiped match on. When I say that I wasn't picky, I mean that as long as they were a guy above a 2 on a scale of 10 and didn't throw out any major super creep vibes, I was pretty willing to give them a try. I know that this may sound pretty dumb to some people, but I'm the kind of person that is really willing to give anyone a shot to see if we vibe, if that makes sense. Anyways, on to the first date story. I had matched with a guy named Jake on one of the apps, and he seemed like a pretty straightforward guy. His profile was your basic mid-20s dude that was into tech and fitness, 2 things that were actually bonuses for me. He and I spoke for a while, sent a few photos, had a few phone calls, and he was pretty much the most average guy I've ever spoken with. I was totally okay with average. In fact, that's kind of what I was looking for more than anything. We agreed to meet up for lunch at a small diner-like restaurant, and we set a date. The date comes, I show up first, and I get the table for the 2 of us. As I'm sitting there, just waiting, I get a text from Jake saying that he's had some car troubles and that he's going to be a few minutes late. But he was 100% not ghosting me. That was fine with me. I get it. I've had my shares of why won't my rust bucket start moments. I tell him I'm at the table, and that it's totally fine, that I understand, and so forth and so on. After about 20 or so more minutes, he finally does walk into the restaurant and to our table. But he looks like he's having a panic attack. He's sweating. It was early spring, so it was still pretty chilly outside, and he just looked distressed and disheveled overall. He sits down, and immediately just kind of looks like he's lost all sense of the situation. Like something has happened, and he's freaking out. But he can't make it not obvious that he's freaking out. I ask him if he's okay and what's going on, and he kind of just starts looking at me like he's about to start sobbing. As soon as this happens, I hear shouting. I see several cops running into the restaurant, telling him to get down on his knees and subsequently arresting him. It took me a few minutes to convince them that I was already there at the restaurant and that I was not with him prior to the minute he walked in. Thankfully, the host and server could vouch for me on this, as come to find out, on his way to the date, Mr. Jake had actually hit someone with his car and then kept going. I don't mean like he sideswiped or bumped somebody else's vehicle. I mean he literally hit a person and ran over their leg, causing major injury and then kept going to meet up with me at the restaurant. I'm assuming I was supposed to be an alibi, Or I guess I would have been if he hadn't already been being followed and looked for by the police. So, obviously, that date ended pretty quickly with him being shoved in the back of a police cruiser and me just staring at the floor like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Thankfully, the waiter was sympathetic, and she didn't make me pay for my drink, which was nice. I guess at least I got a free Dr. Pepper out of the situation. And the second one is one that's not necessarily scary, but it's still what I would consider a dating horror story. It was, once again, a story where I met up with a guy that I had met on one of those dating apps. This one was a dude named Chris. Chris's profile was a bit above the others that I looked at on the apps, because Chris was actually really attractive, and he was all about staying fit, as he claimed he was former military. Now, I've never been with a military guy, but I do know a few of them. My brother, for one, and I have found that most of them are fairly tolerable, and even pretty fun to hang out with. Talking with Chris went pretty smoothly, at first, though he seemed to have a really strict, I can't chat with you before 8 p.m. kind of schedule about him, which, admittedly, had me initially concerned that he may have been a married man looking for an affair. I figured I would at least see it through to the first date, and see if I could spot an indentation on his ring finger, or try to ask him what it was all about. I mean, it could have been that he had a job that he worked until then and couldn't have his phone with him. Or maybe he just had other adult responsibilities that he had to see to. I was willing to be patient with him and to get answers, so we scheduled a date for dinner. That 8 p.m. rule made it kind of hard to do anything else, and I was looking forward to it. Once again, I was early to the date, and I got a table for us. Then, when he finally shows up to the date, he walks in with another woman. I was a bit confused and taken aback, thinking he really had the audacity to bring someone else to a date like that. But it was even more awkward when he sat down and said, "It's very nice to finally meet you in person. This is my mother." This man literally brought his mother on the date without warning me. Now, mind you, if his mother had needed his care or been disabled, I would have had no issue with it, assuming he probably would have informed me beforehand. But this woman was quite fit and definitely able to take care of herself. And she was definitely there because she wanted to be there. Which was even weirder. At no point did Chris stop and think or act like this was a weird thing. He just kept up the conversation as if she wasn't there. Then, it hit the apex of, oh my god, this is so freaking awkward, when it came time to order. He tried to order one thing, and his mother told him no. Then, told the waiter something else. When the waiter walked away, he tried to tell his mom that he wanted the other thing, almost whining like a little kid. But she told him that it was too fatty and that he needed to watch his carbs. I just kind of sat there like, what? Was this woman really ordering for her adult, former military son like this while he was on a date with another woman? Again, I know that this wasn't scary, but it was definitely my, nope, I'm done with this moment. The entire date was so strange, and I pretty much ghosted him after this. I tried to think that maybe I was just being shallow about the whole thing, but it was too much. Chris was actually my last date through any of those apps, and I kind of just embraced being single for a while, for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. I've been bouncing between a few different dating apps for a few years now, and while I'm still not in a long-term relationship, it hasn't all been bad. I've at least met a few people that have become good friends, but I did have one date that was very memorable for different reasons. I'll start by saying that I found my date on an app that was heavily used by the LGBTQ community. I'm a female, and I ended up coming across a woman that I'll refer to as Jody. She was gorgeous. She had a few pictures on her profile, but her bio was kind of lacking. She gave a few things about herself and what she was looking for in a partner, but that was about it. Unfortunately, I'm used to seeing a fake profile on occasion, and catfishers, so I was hesitant, but I guess I was thinking that I would either find a good date or find another account to report. I was surprised when I got a response back within a reasonable amount of time, and it didn't seem like a canned response. She greeted me and made small talk about herself and what her interests were. She even apologized if she seemed dull and short-answered, as she explained that she was new to this and just recently accepted who she was. And this made me feel a bit better about her being a genuine person, because it's normal for people to be withdrawn and shy. So, I was ready and willing to take her under my wing and help her feel comfortable with herself. We started talking more, and quite frequently. Daily, even. It all stayed within the app, though, as she said she wasn't ready to talk or text via phone. I could understand that, especially if she hadn't come out to her friends or family yet. So, it was probably about 3 weeks of us talking. I wasn't too confident that we would ever meet, or at least not in the near future, so I started accepting the fact that she may just be a new friend, which was fine. However, she did finally ask about meeting up, casually, for drinks or something, and I was all for it. Jody and I agreed to meet at a bar and grill that was about midway for both of us. She was already there when I showed up, and she looked just like her photos. Except, her hair was a little longer. She was sitting at the bar, looking around the front for what I would assume would be me. I walked over to her and she hugged me immediately and had the biggest smile on her face. We ordered drinks and wings and just continued our conversation from the app. It was like we knew each other for years. We could finish each other's sentences, we had the same sense of humor, and she just genuinely seemed to have a lot of fun. Like, I could tell that this was the true Jody. This was who she wanted to be. She grabbed my hand a few times and said that she really appreciated me being so patient with her. It wasn't a big deal to me. I would like to assume that anyone meeting new people would do the same, but I know that we don't live in a perfect world. Now, the date was going great. Perfect, even in my opinion. But one thing that I noticed was how her phone went off quite a bit, and she would constantly look down at it. However, other than looking at it or swiping the notifications away, she stayed off of it. I'm sure many people would find it rude, and if she was constantly on it, I would probably have a different opinion on it, but I couldn't help but notice that when she did look at it, her mood seemed to change. Her smile would slowly fade, and then she would look back up at me and smile. At some point in the night, her phone lit up with a phone number that I couldn't see the name on. It was pretty obviously a phone call. It was obvious that it was getting to her based on her size and how her swiping to dismiss it was getting more and more eccentric. So, I just told her if you need to answer someone, I totally get it. She immediately started apologizing, and I assured her that I was not upset. It just seemed like maybe it was important, and I suggested that she take it if she needed to. She thanked me, and excused herself, saying that she would be right back. I watched as she walked to the front and started talking on her phone. From the look on her face and her hand motions, I could tell that this was not a pleasant conversation. When it was finally over, She walked back and again apologized for it, and now visibly upset, she explained that it was her ex, and that they had split up over a month ago, but they wouldn't leave her alone. Given the situation we were in, and since she didn't say much more about them, I just assumed it was a bitter ex and I didn't want to ask because she obviously didn't want to talk about it. So, we pushed it aside and continued with our date. After we finished our last drinks, we decided to head out for the night. I was pretty smitten with her, so when she looked down at her phone one more time and asked if she could spend some more time at my place, I agreed. She wanted to leave her car there and just get a ride home with me. We walked to my car, got in, and continued our conversation on our way home. The parking lot at my apartment was pretty limited, and since I was getting back late, I was going to have to parallel park. There was a car behind me, so I rolled down my window to let them go by before I started. As they were passing, they slowed down almost to a stop right next to me. At first, I was about to make a comment about them being in the way, when Jody said, "Oh my god," and then exclaimed that that was her ex's car. It was too dark for me to see a person inside. They may have had tinted windows too. It was kind of hard to tell. But they did have a lighter colored stripe down the side of the car, so I assumed that's how she could tell. I definitely was not ready to deal with an ex on a first date, but was ready to call the cops if necessary. So, after they finally passed me, I parked and got out, ready for confrontation with some crazy lady. What I did not expect was this burly football player guy to get out of the car. Crap. All I could think in my head was, he wouldn't start a fight with a girl, right? He immediately yelled at me, demanding to know who I was and what Jody was doing with me. Before I could say anything, Jody jumped in and said that I was a coworker, that we had just had dinner, and that I was going to show her my guinea pig because she was thinking of getting one. I did have a guinea pig though, so I guess that really wasn't a lie. I just stood there, letting her talk to see where this would lead. However, as his tone became more and more aggressive, I put my keys between my fingers and unlocked my phone. She was over on my side of the car, so as he got closer and closer to her, I could tell that she was visibly shaken. I really didn't like where this was going, so I approached them, saying that he needed to step back, but before I could finish, I was punched in the jaw with enough force to make me fall backwards. I was trying to regain my composure and trying to figure out what exactly just happened when I heard Jody screaming. I stood up, and I saw that she had run to the other side of my car, and this guy had just grabbed her by the hair and was dragging her to his car. I was terrified. I'm far from being a small girl, but there was no way I was going to be able to stop this guy. I quickly dialed 911, but thought that I needed to do something right then and there for her. There was no way of knowing what would happen to her if he left with her, if he was willing to deck a total stranger, and a girl at that. So, I ran at them screaming for someone to call for help, shouting out my address and grabbing Jody from the front to hold her back. I was trying to hold her hair so that it wasn't ripped out, but he was fighting me the whole time. Thank God someone walking their dog noticed this and immediately ran over to us. He started fighting with the ex, and the dog was biting ankles until he finally gave up. He let go of Jody, and he turned his anger on this good Samaritan. He didn't really get any hits on him before the cops showed up, though. He was detained, and I sure as hell pressed charges. Once he was out of sight, we all talked to the cops, and that's when I learned that this guy was just as abusive to Jody behind closed doors as he was to us that night in public. Jody had finally gotten the courage to split up with him, but he didn't accept that. She was very apologetic and embarrassed, but it's not like it was her fault. So I still invited her in to calm down. We talked more that night, and she did end up staying, so that way she knew that she had a safe place to go, in case he somehow got out. To sum it up, Jody and I became pretty close. A romantic relationship didn't really work out for us, but she's become a really good friend. And, in fact, we now live together. I at least was able to convince her to file a restraining order and block him on everything, so that she could finally stop hearing from him. I do joke with her, though, that that was definitely the most memorable first date that I have ever been on. So, that, my frienderinos, was a collection of 3 first date horror stories, or just kind of weird and creepy first date stories. It seems like they all could have kind of been online app or online dating stories too, but I think embracing this one to be first date stories is a better way to do it, because these were some messed up first dates. Wow. I mean, obviously, they were kind of creepy. The one with the ex was terrifying, because that would just be a horrible ordeal to be a part of. But the one that really stands out to me, I guess, the part of the story, is the one about the guy who hit the person with his car. How do you hit somebody with your car and just drive off to go to a date? How did he think that was going to end? Really? Because you hit someone with your car, dude. I can only imagine his car was probably damaged by the person that he hit. So to just, I don't know. Anyway, that's just whatever. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories, these first date stories. I did. I loved them. I thought they were great. February is such a fun month to do these kinds of stories. The ex-lover stories, the dating apps, the first dates, catfish stories, stuff like that. It's just so much fun to do these stories. And February really is the best month to do them. So if you guys like me doing lovey-dovey couple stories like this, I guess is what I don't know why I said that. If you guys like me doing these stories in Feb, let me know. I'll probably keep it a tradition. The scary ex stories are kind of all over the place, but definitely at least one in February, right? And if you overall enjoyed the video, please hit that thumbs up button, as it does help the channel so much. You can also subscribe if you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, and if you really feel so bold, leave me a comment down below. Let me know how you're doing. How's your date going? Any plans for Valentine's Day? If not, or if you don't want to tell me, what do you like to put on your baked potatoes? This is the second time I've talked about baked potatoes this month. This time I will not be eating a baked potato, but I don't know. For me, I feel like the best thing on a baked potato is a little bit of butter, not too much, some salt and pepper, sour cream, cheese, and bacon. That's a very American-sounding baked potato, very high in saturated fats, but you know what? If I'm eating a potato, I'm going to have some good stuff on it. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful day. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope that I do see you in the next video, but until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and please never forget it. And until I see you again, my friends, much love, and sleep well.